Good morning, everyone. Happy Mondays, and welcome to the news agenda with me, Fleetstreetfox. And today I'm joined by Sunday Mirror columnist Mark Steel, everybody, whose curtains you may recognise from Lady Gaga's last gig. Now, we're going to take you through the best stories of the day, the things that are most important in the papers today. And through it all, we want you to ask us your questions. So dig into the comments, ask us whatever's on your mind, and we'll do our best to answer it for you. We can't answer them all, but we can answer the best ones. And I apologise for the fact we're 10 minutes late today, but the broadband collapsed. Thank you, Thatcher, for cocking that up in the 1990s. So,
is that because you're in a prairie, or is that just a picture of a prairie?
No, just a picture of a prairie. And that's actually the Weald of Kent.
If you'd broken regulations by slipping out to northern Canada, that would explain it.
No, that's actually the Weald of Kent, God's own country. So, what we want to talk about today is, like, the Mirror, like most newspapers, has splashed on the news that Captain Tom Moore, a centenarian who helped raise, I think it was £32 million for NHS charities during the first lockdown, is sadly in hospital with COVID. Now, Mark, it was always a bit dystopian in a way, the fact that the nation paid so much attention to and gave so much money for a cause, espoused by an elderly gentleman who was being not forced, but who was having to walk an awful lot when he could barely walk. He had to use a frame. And we would have complained as a nation about having to give the same amount of money or attention to properly fund the NHS in the first place. But he did do it. We did take him to our hearts. And he did a lot to highlight, how much help NHS staff actually need during all this as well. So there are millions of people who will really care, as Terry and Prasanna and all these people whose comments are coming up in there now. Millions of people who do really care about how this particular 100-year-old is doing, when perhaps we haven't noticed so many others who have passed away in this pandemic. Is that a good thing? I mean, I don't know. I'm trying not to pick holes in this, but obviously,
I think what we can say is that this is one of the extraordinary things about this pandemic that we have learned is how to fund the NHS, because the old taxation method where you take money off people according to how much they've got and fund a health service like that is clearly out of date. The way to fund a health service in the modern world is to get 99-year-olds to run around the garden. And that's just a much better economic model. And I was wondering whether you could even tailor this to the time of year, because in the winter, when people need more, the health service needs more money, then you can go just go wander around like we're watching now. Go on, Tom. And then in the winter, come on, move. The dialysis machines need buying. Move. That seems to be the way we fund a health service, and that's how we ended up with this story. And it's not, and none of that is to downplay this bloke who is utterly brilliant, and he's done that. He was asked to do it, and just like anybody who's asked to do charity, and they do it, and it's selfless and a wonderful example of humanity and so on. But what a situation that this is how we're left to fund things, by getting a bloke to walk round on his walking frame round the garden. And you're right, so that 40 million pounds that he raised, that could have been raised from taxation.
Yeah, penny on income tax.
If you suggest that, you get a load of angry people from the CEOs of various companies saying, how dare they insist that we should pay some of our money that we've earned and put into Panama tax accounts, when there's plenty of money about. All you need to do is get other people who are only 90 to send in some of their pension. So all of that is to say that it's infuriating that we get to this stage, but obviously lovely sweet bloke who's just done nothing but, if only the people running the country were as selfless as he was.
Yeah, and there's something else that I wanted to mention Sue's comment as well. There's something else about the way we're treating as a nation the plight of this particular elderly gentleman, because for months now, lots of people from all sides of the debate have said, yes, but those who are getting ill with COVID, and those who are dying from COVID, are those who are at the end of their lives anyway, and it doesn't really matter. And I very much doubt anyone would make that argument about Captain Tom. And what Sue says here about, I'm sure he was vaccinated, they changed the story, it doesn't ring true. I don't know, Sue, if you were engaging in conspiracies about any of the 30,000 people who died in care homes already last year. But you are doing it about this particular gentleman who needs some help with his breathing. His daughter is the one who has said that he was not vaccinated. So if you know better than his daughter, then by all means, you know, call up the BBC and get on the news and try and claim that Captain Tom's daughter is lying about him. He wasn't vaccinated because he had pneumonia and he was being treated for that. And it's one of the arguments for why we have to get these vaccinations. Because on that spread we showed earlier on about Captain Tom, there was a big piece on the side about how yesterday the government hit almost 600,000 people being vaccinated. Up on the top right there, picture of Liz Truss for some reason. And he couldn't get the jab because he had pneumonia. And that means that those people who don't have the vaccine because they're too ill to get the vaccine need to be protected by a shield wall of people who are vaccinated. And there is some concern as to how many infections can still get through. You may possibly be able to still transmit it if you're vaccinated. But we need to have this jab to protect people like Captain Tom, don't we, Mark? There's all these people who say, I don't have a vaccine. It's people like Captain Tom that you're infecting.
Yes, we absolutely do. I'm really fascinated by Susan's comment, who wrote in there, not you, Susan, but who said that I'm sure he was vaccinated, because that, in a way, that is sort of the nub of all of these conspiracy theories. Because if you're right, that means that Captain Tom is in on this fraud. He's part of it. Oh, don't trust Captain Tom. He's one of them that's deliberately saying he's been vaccinated when he hasn't been. When he hasn't been vaccinated when he has been. That's sort of that's what I find quite chilling, really. The number of people who, because anyone who goes along with this conspiracy theories, they are suggesting that everyone's in on it. There's about 20 million people who are in on it. One of which now is Captain Tom. He's probably leading the whole thing. He's probably only 23.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you for all your well wishes that you've got in there. If you've got any questions or anything about the vaccines or Captain Tom, get into the comments and we'll do our best to answer them for you. Now, I want to get on to our second story of the day, which is about Marcus Rashford. Another man like Captain Tom who's done more to be a fantastic opposition to this government, as you were saying in your column yesterday, Mark. Obviously I read avidly. Better opposition than Keir Starmer or the Labour Party. And he's been getting a load of racist abuse because, now correct me if I'm wrong, Man United drew with Sheffield United at the weekend, I think.
They lost in the week.
United. Right. And now you watch football, Mark, and you pay attention to this, and I don't. So can you explain to me why it is that when their team is winning, they like their black players, and when their team is losing, they want to be racist and vile and abuse them and deport them and assault them and goodness knows what else? How does that work? Are they racist or not racist?
I suspect that they are racist, and that's and that they don't change their mind. They just sort of keep quiet when the black players win the games for them. And I don't know, to be sort of, I think you've got to be really, really hardcore racist to attack Marcus Rashford, given that, as you say, he has, I think probably most people would say that he is the most effective opposition figure in the country. I mean, tremendous. I know the Sports Personality of the Year had to give him a special award just before Christmas, because I suspect that the BBC thought, well, if we have him as one of the contenders, he will overwhelmingly win it, and that'll be seen as political. And I think anyone half decent would have voted for him. So to attack Marcus Rashford, you've got to be really hardcore racist and not care that everyone around you is going to go, what are you talking about? So yeah, in answer to your question, they are full on. These are, if you're sending abuse to Marcus Rashford, you are at the absolute tiny thin end of the wedge of bigotry.
Yeah, as Luty says that, how can racism even exist? It's just awful. Luty, I bet you any money that when Neanderthals were coming into, conflict with Homo sapiens and Homo habiensis and whoever they were, Homo habilis, and all that. Some paleontologist is going to get onto me now and say, look, they weren't all alive at the same time. But whenever the various little pre-human species were in conflict with each other, I bet they were having a go at each other. I bet Neanderthal man was having a go at Homo sapiens, going, you with your big brain, what do you know? You look funny, you look different, get out of here.
Especially because Manchester United played a couple of Neanderthals in midfield, and that went down very badly with some of the old hardcore fans.
Jack says they didn't even lose. They drew 0-0 and they still racially attacked him. It's wrong. Now, but even if just take race out of it for a minute, because it's a thing, isn't it? Especially in football, less so in tennis, for example, or golf. But in football, if your team loses, whether they're white or black, you can have a go at your team. You can get onto social media and say all kinds of disobliging things about them. Why is there that in football? Why do they find that necessary? Because when, Tim Henman loses Wimbledon or Andy Murray or something, the nation just goes, oh, that's it. We don't well, there was a bit of, anti-Scotland sentiment for Andrew Murray. But
I think there's two things there. I think one is that obviously football is sort of tribal and people identify with a team in a way that is less than other sports, obviously, because it's a team sport and it's a team that's attached to your area. So I support Crystal Palace, so most people around here support Crystal Palace. So you feel that it's sort of a little bit a reflection on you and your life, and it's part of your identity, that you're a Palace fan or Middlesbrough fan or whatever it is. So there is that. But that doesn't cause any of this. You can't go to if you're anti-racist, and all your black players were terrible, which is very unlikely, you wouldn't then start blaming them for being black. That is clearly something that comes from somewhere else. But there is something that I think, I saw sort of Ian Wright and Jermaine Jennings talking about this very forcefully, powerfully, very articulate on Match of the Day. And I wouldn't dispute anything now. They're talking about social media sites having to be much, much more stringent on how they get after the people who are sending this sort of abuse and name them and ban them and use whatever sort of legal methods they can. All of that is I'm absolutely with. But there is one thing that I think is worth saying here, that if you are, remember that the racism of the 70s and 80s, and it was so much more ferocious. And I don't mean at all to downplay anything that anyone said to Mark Rashford, which is utterly grotesque, but it was foul. It was so normal to go to a football match and a black player would run up the wing and would have bananas thrown at him. As soon as a black player had the ball, a big section of the crowd would make monkey noises. That was a reflection of a sort of level of racism that we don't really get now. And that's not, I know when people go, but you still get racism, and you still now Nigel Farage and people that say all these appalling things. That is true, but nothing as to what it was in the late 70s when it was ferocious. And the reason it's got from there to here, where it is now, you could never have had anything like all the footballers making a Black Lives Matter gesture at the beginning of the game, as you do now in every game in the Premier League. But the reason for that didn't just go away. It went away because people made it go away, partly through organisations like Rock Against Racism and the Anti-Nazi League, but also just millions and millions of people who just argued on a daily basis, very courageously a lot of the time, because it was pretty violent, the sort of scene in the late 70s and early 80s. And people made it go away and took up the arguments and argued in workplaces, schools, wherever it was, and at football crowds. The National Front, the fascist organisation, used to recruit outside lots of football grounds in the 70s and 80s. And groups of supporters had to get together to form like anti-Nazi groups and sometimes literally chase these people away. And so what I'm saying from that is not that it's gone away completely, but it has got much, much better. And it's got much better because people have made it get better. People have taken it upon themselves to argue with people, to organise, to drive racism away. And I think that's still what has to happen now.
It was made socially unacceptable, wasn't it? What was socially acceptable in the 70s became socially unacceptable because you're going to get your ear chewed out by someone if you behave like that, and you had to try and behave a bit better. But as Basola points out here, there's still some structural racism, quite a bit of it, which means things are very difficult. And has lockdown and the fact that people aren't going to the games, have you noticed that makes any difference at all? Because people are watching it online. They're not in a social environment anymore. They're not going to a match. They're not surrounded by people, being watched by the ushers and stuff. So they can do stuff at home.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
And it's not a social event
anymore. That's a very good point. And that is probably true of social media generally, isn't it? That we know that the people, you get it, I get it. I mean, well, clearly black people get it, women get it more than anyone. The abuse, the savagery of these people on Twitter and Facebook and so on. And of course, that's because they're on their own. You wouldn't be able to do that if you did that in a workplace. If you were in an office, or if you worked in Lidl and you went around shouting the sort of abuse that gets shouted on Twitter at people, you would very quickly be punched in the face and taken out, and that would be the last day you work there. But you can do it at home. All the angry. And yes, isolation sort of helps it. And here we are isolation is the name of our year.
Here we are abusing some people we've never met. It's calling them racists. They probably are, let's face it. And as Takey points out, the people have an idea of racism, they're unsure, have little confidence in themselves. By doing that, it makes them feel better, makes them feel stronger, or make them think they're better. I think you're right, Takey. There's people who are getting something out of doing it. They're getting a thrill of some sort, and they're getting a sense of pleasure or importance or strength, especially when they see a reaction. But then people come along and say, well, don't react to it. Don't show them you're upset, especially online trolls. And there's a lot of people quite reasonably say, it's kind of lets them get away with it, doesn't it? Yeah. When I get abuse on Twitter, there's some of it I just, whatever, I'm not going to bother with you. And it's sometimes I take issue with it if it seems to be a little bit too much. And if I think it's easily corrected or I can make a joke out of it. And other times I just try to brush it aside. But it can really get to you because our social media is right up here in our personal space. Right, you're all in my back room at the moment, literally. Okay, this is where I spend my days, and there's thousands of people in here, and you can make comments about it and tell me whatever you think about me, because you can see me early in the morning with my eyes like this. And when you reply to us, or we talk to you, we talk to each other in this fashion, it's right up in your personal face. And when you check your phone last thing at night, or when it's some kind of personal space, an intimate moment when someone else is there and with what they're saying is horrid, then it's like someone has whispered it in your ear just before bed. How could you possibly sleep? How could you get that off your mind if someone whispered in your ear before bed, Fleet Street dog, more like? I get that a lot, and that's niggling. It's really difficult. I think we need to all remember that when we're talking to other people like this, we're in their house, we're in their bedroom, we're in their bathroom with them if they're checking their phone when on the bog. It's difficult. You're a white male, Mark. You're an older white male. What kind of
older?
Older than me.
That's like really triggered me, actually, Susan. Oh no. Okay. All right, what's the rest of the question?
What kind of abuse do you get? Obviously, you've been heckled. But what kind of abuse do you get as an older white male? Thank you, Ban Billy James. Remove yourself off me, stupid woman.
I get people saying things like, but you're older, things like that. That's really hurtful. No, I get what I was doing a line react actually about saying, I said there's no collection of words that you could put on Twitter that wouldn't offend someone somewhere. You could put, I'm enjoying a delightful sunset across Dorset this evening, and someone would put, not so delightful if you suffer from sunset aversion Dorset syndrome, actually, Mark. have a thought for sad sufferers in future, please.
Exactly.
So
And then there's always someone who actually genuinely does have sunset aversion syndrome. And you can genuinely cause these problems as well as everything
well,
else.
maybe. But of course, I get. This is a horrible thing to say, but it's true. I find that the angry people who claim to be from the left are as abusive as those on the right. So I get sort of people calling me a stinking communist arse, but you know, all the sort of things you can imagine, traitor and all that. But then there will be people who claim to be on the left who think you're on a slightly, you've said something they slightly or not even slightly disagree with, but you've not backed their cause, you know, like there's people who sort of have a little I stand with Chris Williamson little logo thing, the MP that was suspended from the Labour Party for anti-Semitism. And you know, people with that, and they call me a traitor. See, so they are absolutely foul. And you just block them, and you know, you just block them. And yeah, traitor. If you're a traitor, that's the worst possible thing, isn't it? So I get quite a bit of that. And then I noticed there was one. I had one little sort of strain of it about a week ago. Quite a lot of people saying that. And then I didn't reply, I just blocked some of them. And then I got a couple of very angry people who were annoyed because he won't even debate with us. And that did actually fascinate me, because if you imagine in a pub, if you went up to someone and called someone a stinking rotten, if as this is the Mirror, this would just be a big load of asterisks.
Yeah, family newspaper.
But for 2 minutes like that. And then you went, all right, mate, and went to another table. Oh, you won't even debate with us now? That's a debate. The Oxford Union. Today, our house, we argue the motion that this house thinks you're a stinking arse something WFCW something. I propose the motion.
Yeah. And remember, there are some people as well who they are trying to have a debate, and they're you know, it's not, they've done it in a way that's ambiguous, or it's just, you know, Twitter or Instagram or comments on Facebook and stuff. It's not always the best way to get a point across. And sometimes when you engage with them, you find that what they're trying to say is the thing that you're saying, and they're actually agreeing with you, but it came out the first time like they hated your guts, and it's just, it was written differently, or you looked at it wrong. And that's why the earlier comment who said, get off Twitter, social media, you stupid woman, is no, because that's like saying, get out of the human race then, you stupid woman, number one. And number two is, sometimes it's nice to know that you got it wrong, or someone else got it wrong, or to, you know, be part of something that changes. But we can't have that with Rashford, can we?
No, it's not the same at all. And most people, it is important to remember this. Most people, I know this, like myself from Twitter, and I know I'm not black and I'm not a woman, and that is where the bulk of abuse goes to, is people who are black and women. I'm aware of that. But for myself, so when I do my shows about the towns, the first thing I do if I'm going to somewhere is I'll say, does anybody know about this particular town? And usually I get like anything up to about 1,000 or so replies from people, and every one of them is interesting or funny or engaged or something. There's hardly anyone ever puts anything abusive. And I think that's what most people use social media for, is they just go, oh yeah, I know something about this. And they're not going on there all day long to go, you bastard, how dare you, possibly you said that, it was, you know, and it was, no, it's not like that. And they're very funny. I met some of them. I was going to Folkestone when I was doing this sort of a live version of this. I'll see if I can remember some of these. I went like Monmouth, which is right on the English-Welsh border. Someone said the marvelous thing about Monmouth is if you drink enough cider and stand on the right spot, you can be in Wales but be sick on England.
That's the attitude. That's the spirit.
But that's funny, isn't it? And I think that's most of the stuff I get really, really. I put a thing on yesterday. I know this is very much. I'm aware this is very much what might be described as a first world problem. I sent off for some rum and from France. Right, I like rum. So and it's got stuck because of Brexit. So I put a little funny thing on Twitter. Not a funny thing, but I put a thing on Twitter saying this is the worst thing about Brexit. Clearly, I don't really think that. I put my run from Nicaragua's got stuck at customs because of Brexit. Put that on the side of a bus. And somebody sent a picture. I don't know how they do these things, but someone replied with a picture of the bus, the famous bus with Mark's Nicaraguan run will get stuck at customs on the side of it. And I thought, oh, the ingenuity and the artistry of that. That's just made me so happy. Now, none of this is to say that it's not obviously it's serious, but we have to find ways of addressing the problems that has come up here. And I think that there's obviously a Twitter problem, but racism is something that is separate from that. Twitter hasn't made these people racist. Football hasn't made them racist.
Well, hang on a minute. One thing, as Wayne says here, my question is media coverage about racism, highlighting or reinforcing. Are we reinforcing it by highlighting it? What's the agenda? We're all the same colour on the inside. You're right, Wayne. But we have an issue here because on Facebook or Twitter and other social media, if you start saying something racist, it's not made to be socially unacceptable in the way Mark was discussing earlier on. There's an algorithm that feeds more stuff back to you that is of the same tone. And therefore, you get the reinforcement on social media. To some extent, it becomes socially acceptable to this small part of society that's on that bit of social media saying racist stuff. And so it carries on. Right? We have to find a way to break that algorithm. If we're going to fix the problem, so Wayne can stop talking about it, we can stop talking about it, Marcus Rashford can go and just play football and save kids' lives and do the stuff he wants to do. We've got to, it's that, the way they get it reinforced on social media is the issue.
Yes, they do. Yeah, they do get it reinforced. I think though, Susan, it comes from sort of the drive to make these sorts of comments and to do something like that. Obviously, the person earlier on who said it makes people feel big and so on, and especially that social media does do that. Before, you could have sat in a pub and moaned about Marcus Rashford. Now you can directly send him a message. That makes people feel powerful, definitely. But something else here, much of the media, and I don't really like using that phrase because it assumes it's all one big block, but there are certain newspapers and certain people within certain newspapers who over the last 10 years or so have been relentless in blaming foreign people abroad, immigrants, refugees for everything. During the years of austerity, in particular, this was supposed to be these were the people, look who's taken all the money. It's a Kurdish family that's living in five of them in a 2-bedroomed flat at the end of the estate. They're taking all the money. That sort of argument was promoted so virulently that it is bound to have an effect. And that has, without any question, that has fueled racism. Apart from the more obvious people like Farage, whose whole raison d'etre is to blame people from abroad for anything that's gone wrong in this country. So
with a Huguenot name like mine.
What? Sorry.
Yeah, you've got the Huguenot surname like mine. We could even come over on the same boat. Who knows?
You're a Huguenot name.
It's Huguenot. Fascinating, isn't it? Now, thank you everyone for your thoughts on Captain Tom and Marcus Rashford. Let's think about our algorithms as we go on. There's one story I want to bring to you next. We've got one bit of good news we want to leave you with to make you feel happier for the rest of the day. Here we go. We spent a lot of effort on that, I didn't. Huge amounts of effort. Now, this is a fantastic story about a guy called Adam Simpson York. There he is at the bottom of the story. That's not him in the uniform. He's at the bottom. And he set up a Facebook page called Medals Going Home. And he's buying up medals on eBay cheaply, right? People just, they're just sticking them up there. Medals that have come out of charity shops and wherever else. trying to return them to the families of those who won the medals in the first place. And this is a story about a widow called Jocelyn Trent, who had no idea that her granddad had service in the First World War and had won medals, and Adam has managed to get them back to her. It's kind of, people say medals are sort of pointless. They're just a bit of tin. My granddad never wanted to wear his. But it matters to have that connection to people that are long gone, doesn't it, Mark? It's a nice thing to do for people. Yeah,
definitely, yeah. So explain it again there, Susan, because I've just got lost with all here.
He set up, this young lad, who is 35, young than me, has set up a Facebook page, and our viewers can go and have a look at it. It's called Medals Going Home. And it's a way of reuniting families with medals that have somehow left the family, perhaps years ago, and is going through the memorabilia sort of industry, being sold on eBay, perhaps. And he buys them up cheaply and then tries to return them to the families of those who had won the medal originally. Because often someone passes away, the medals go in a bin or a bucket, and they get sent down whatever the house clearance people. And perhaps other members of their family do not know what's happened to them and how they've ended up. And people are getting these medals back, and they can treasure them. I still treasure my granddad's, even though he never was that much bothered about them. And it matters.
What did he do?
He was at D-Day, although he didn't land for a few days, and he drove a Bofors gun from Normandy all the way across Europe to Hamburg, across the Elbe, Seine and the Rhine, and helped liberate a satellite camp from Belsen. He never spoke to us about it. So he didn't care for foreign. He didn't go abroad after that. He didn't like it. Went once.
That's such a common sort of trait, I think. And it's sort of, I don't know, there's something in this story that speaks to that, isn't there? That so many people of that generation who we now regard as like, the people who saved us from Hitler, that then not only do they sort of, a lot of them will talk about it in a certain way, but then they didn't go abroad again. It wasn't like it was, they then settled down to the most peaceful, calm sort of life, never really wanted any excitement at all after that. And I think that's really, really common, isn't it? And now that that's so much part of history, because it's 80 years ago, or D-Day 76 years ago, we all sort of want to talk about it, and they did this thing.
But when you have if you can have the medals returned to you, then the thing that they didn't really want to talk about, for whatever reason, it was important or they were traumatized by it, is something that their families can know about. And I'm proud of the fact that I know my granddad helped liberate a satellite camp of Belsen. I'm proud of the things that he did. He wasn't proud of it particularly. He didn't enjoy it or anything like that. But it's nice to know that. And if someone can return your granddad's medals to you, then it's a reason to go and look things up and learn stuff about our past.
No, it's brilliant. That is brilliant.
So well done, Adam. Thank you for doing that for people. Go and have a look at his page, everybody, and try to remember, not everybody's racist, not everybody's a troll. Lots of people are lovely. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you all again on Wednesday when we're doing a special homeschooling edition of the News Agenda. So tune in then and tell us about the fun you have teaching your kids during lockdown. Bye-bye, everybody. See you on Wednesday.